Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Red Tinted Glasses podcast, where we finally have a win to speak about as the Dons progressed in the Scottish Cup to beat Elgen 3-0. Unfortunately, we can't give you the cup draw on this podcast because we're recording this on Monday evening during the Dundee Derby, and of course, the best way to sell the Scottish Cup is do the draw post 10 p.m. on a Monday night. Crazy, isn't it, Phil? We'll also preview the weekend's league action as St Mirren are the visitors to Pittodrie as the Dons look to make it 2 wins in a row and get the league campaign back up and running after that stuttering start over the winter period. But unfortunately, Phil, the weekend saw some sad losses for Scottish football. Dennis Law announced as well. We won't speak about him because me and you are far too young to have appreciated how good a footballer Dennis Law really was. But from an Aberdeen point of view, the sad news announced on Sunday that Jimmy Calderwood died at the age of 69 after suffering a battle with dementia and Alzheimer's. I'm 33 this year, still 32 at time of recording. Good to see I remember how old I am. For me, Jimmy Calderwood was probably one of the first Aberdeen managers I properly remember. Ebby Scovdale being the first, then Wed Pele, and then into the Jimmy Calderwood era. So for someone like me in those teenage years, Jimmy brought me lots of highs during his 4 seasons in charge. They certainly weren't dull, those seasons in charge. Missing out on Europe close in the first couple of seasons, finally getting it, of course, which led to that memorable run in 07-08, and then qualifying us back for Europe in his final season before departing the club after that final day victory over Hibernian. Pretty sad and pretty maybe surprising news as well, but I think you see the outpouring of affection from fans and former players just shows how well loved he was as a man and certainly well loved at Aberdeen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the sort of tributes that have been pouring in from across Scottish football, I think is kind of testament to how big of a character Jimmy was. Um, a real personality within the game, and a real great story as well. Sort of starting his coaching career over in the Netherlands and making his way over. But yeah, much like yourself, the first manager I can properly remember, he was in charge when I went to my first ever Dons game. And like you say, a lot of fond memories from those formative years as a Dons fan. Great kits, plenty of screamers from Scott Severin and Jamie Smith along the way, and then obviously the good European nights against Copenhagen and Bayern Munich as well as the sort of the sort of fixtures that really got you hooked on the Dons as a young guy.
Yeah, and I was on the phone to Mez today. As part of the fans project, we've got a display planned for, or banner planned for Jimmy Calderwood for the game at the weekend. If you're watching or listening to this podcast, I've put the link to the GoFundMe page in the description of the video and audio. So feel free to donate to that fund once we've reached that total, which I think actually has already been smashed, such has been the response from fans to that. All funds remaining will be used for future plans that we have. One upcoming, I think actually next month, but more on that will be announced nearer the time from the fans project page. But back onto Jimmy as well. You mentioned kind of the memories from the formative years. Uh, Jimmy Calderwood, as I said, he was never dull. A lot of late goals during his time, and the club managed to put out a 9-minute tribute video, which I think just kind of sums up the impact he had on the club. And I remember when Richard Gordon was announcing the news yesterday, the chills and goosebumps that went kind of through me, the emotion as well, because that's someone that I remember leading Aberdeen out of the Allianz Arena, my first ever European away day. Yes, there was some cup horrors. We'll take the Copenhagens and the Bayern Munichs, but we also had the Queen's Park on penalties, Queen of the South at Hampden, Dunfermline in the replay, Dundee United 4-1 in the semi-final of the League Cup. I look back, I look back fondly on Jimmy Calderwood's time as Aberdeen manager. He really should have won something during his time at Aberdeen. That League Cup defeat to Dundee United is a real sore one, as of course the Queen of the South, because Walter Smith coming out years later and saying, had Aberdeen got to the final, Rangers wouldn't have won it given they were in the, I think, the UEFA Cup final beforehand. But it's not just for people under Jimmy Calderwood that will remember that European Games, Copenhagen, as we mentioned. A lot of people hold Madrid in high regard, the Dnipro as well. But a lot of domestic games as well, going back to watching that video, the Barry Nicholson last minute equaliser at Tynecastle. I remember meeting my cousin for the first time, and my uncle had just put her down for a nap, and he said, if everyone can stay quiet for 5 minutes, and Barry Nicholson scored, and I was running around the house. Safe to say she was awake very quickly after that. I saw the John Stewart winner at Celtic Park as well. I remember as a kid not being allowed to stay up and listen to that game, so got the wireless in my bedroom and turned it on, and then started screaming, cheering when that went in. Darren Mackey's winner in the cup replay that celebrated with my dog, and my best friend Finley will be tuning into this episode from Perth, bouncing around the living room. Okay, we won't go into too much what followed, but there's little games, and I think for fans certainly of our age, Phil, when we were in that kind of younger years or prime of just going out and following your team for the first time, they're the core memories that really stick. I know a lot of people will mention Chris Clark at Tynecastle, but for me, the big one was Cali 1-0 in 2006, where Steve Lovell lobbed the keeper just to put us into the top six, to give us a chance to solidify that position. And there was a pitch invasion, and it was the first time I really felt probably a proper bounce. And as well, the 2-3 cup game at Tannadice when we were 2-0 down at half time and came back from 3-2. So there's loads of games you could pick out from there.
Yeah, and like I say, I mean, it's not even just games. I mean, the kits of the Calderwood era always stick out in my head as some of our best. Some of the unlikely random cult heroes that would pop up. Like I say, my first ever Don shirt had Smith 7 on the back of it. Like I say, I still hold to high regard Barry Nicholson's better than Bastian Schweinsteiger. So, it's all these little things. And I think a lot's got to be given. Like you say, it was entertaining, albeit even if we were on the end of a 5-3 loss or whatever it may be. And I think a lot has to be said. And I mean, I know when I was younger, a lot of people took the easy option of supporting Celtic or Rangers, because Aberdeen had been so bad for people of my generation in '99 and the sort of early 2000s. And I think Calderwood did a lot to kind of grasp back a lot of those young fans that could have been swayed away.
Yeah, and look, as I said, it's maybe a different generation of Aberdeen fans will look on his time differently. People will remember, excuse me, not all the signings were great. Say Jackie McNamara, you could put in there. Mark Kerr didn't have the best time at the club, but for me, for every good game he had, yes, he had a bad game. For every bad player he signed, there was a good signing in there as well. But for me, I'll always look back on his time fondly, and I'll remember once I got back to Finlay's house after that last home game against Hibs, being so excited um, for a next European adventure and cycling home in disbelief from his house that Calderwood was sacked. And I was like, where the hell do we go from here? Like, who's going to keep up that job of us being at the top end of the table? I mean, I was speaking to Keith as well, and he was like, maybe, in some aspects, Calderwood's time at Aberdeen's highlighted a bit more because of what is at either end. Of course, the Patterson area, and then the absolute disaster that Mark McGee was when he came into Aberdeen. So, look, I think the club's kind of summed it up perfectly. He got us back. He restored the pride. He got us up to where we should be. And I think the majority of Aberdeen fans will hold him in high regard. And I'm sure that tribute that will be paid on Saturday will be befitting of the man.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, a character that was larger than just his club. And like I say, I mean, the tributes that have poured in, I think, are testament to just how well liked he was. Not only amongst us, but across the board.
Yeah, and obviously recalling kind of some of this from our own personal doing the podcast, Lee Mayer stands out, Richie Byrne, Steve Tosh as well, all the kind of talk they did when we interviewed them of Jimmy Calderwood and Jamie Smith as well. So, all guys that will have held the manager in high regard, and a manager that fair knew how to pull off a tan on the first day of pre-season as well. So yeah, very sad news, and yeah, thoughts with Jimmy and his family at this time. So away from that, Phil, we'll speak about on the field matters as the Dons progressed in the Scottish Cup. 6 changes were made for the game. Topi Keskinen completely missing out of the squad. I've not actually seen anything to indicate as to why. Jimmy McGarry not playing either after coming off with cramp at Ibrox, giving us the first opportunity to see a start for Alexander Jensen. Peter Ambrose also starting up top. I think maybe some potentially, I don't know about you, surprised at no Ockles or Dorrington. Maybe more so the former, given he'd had minutes in the 2 league games. And yes, he might not have performed to his best. I know we discussed this pre-match, but surely that was an opportunity to put minutes in the legs.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, we spoke at length pre-match in Elgin, and I think we were both kind of the assumption that Ockles was going to be somewhere in that starting 11, if not getting maybe at least a half under his belt. Because, like you say, maybe not had the best run at it in his opening games. It would have seemed like the perfect opportunity to get him in a match where he could get on the ball and kind of showcase what he's about and get that confidence up. So maybe a little bit surprised not to see him. But no, I think it was a good balance of a squad. I think it was a strong squad, but also, like you say, gave minutes to people that maybe did need them and need that confidence boost, like Morris, Ambrose, getting Jensen in as well to see what he's about it as a left back.
Yeah, and obviously allow Rubizic and Tobers to try and form a partnership at the back as well. But I want to come on to that confidence point you just mentioned, because you highlighted Shaden Morris there, but I think equally Duke will have taken a lot of confidence from the weekend's game. A brace. I mean, feels very, very dubious saying that, because that first goal was never a goal. And an assist for Shaden Morris's goal. A player that could probably still frustrate a lot based on his first half performance, but I think overall both Duke and Morris should be very happy with their performances from Saturday, and I'm sure both will take a lot from that, and probably have done enough to earn starts against St Mirren this weekend.
Yeah, I think the pair of them hopefully are able to kick on a little bit on the back of that. Duke especially, I feel like a lot of people were in the same sort of boat where it felt like a goal was needed just to take the shackles off a little bit
Mhm.
and sort of get him going again really, because I mean he was quite happy to take his man on. It just felt like the final product was lacking. So hopefully that's now back to seeing him at his best. Same with Morris. Obviously had a little bit of a strange time recently, not really getting much minutes off the bench as maybe people would have expected. So to see him starting and contributing positively in the game with a goal and an assist as well, it's good seeing, and hopefully the start of him getting back in the side. But I think as well, Ambrose as well, I was actually quite impressed with.
Mhm.
Hopefully that's another one of those games that sort of picks him up a little bit, or at least shows him that, if he gets the chance, whether it be at Aberdeen or on loan, he can maybe kick on. But I do think his presence and sort of pace up top were really positive in my opinion.
Yeah, I was going to come on to him, so I'm glad you've brought that up. But I think obviously, as you said, Shaden Morris not seen too much, but I think it's put more than enough in on display at the weekend to be knocking at the manager's door, asking for a start this weekend. Unlucky in the second half, obviously seeing a shot come back off the post and the keeper pulling off a good save as well to deny him. But on Peter Ambrose, interesting. You mentioned the word presence up top. I think again he'll feel aggrieved not to have found the back of the net with a header, that hit the top of the crossbar and went out for a goal kick. But I saw Martin Stone pick up this point on Twitter and say that Peter Ambrose actually gave us an out ball at the weekend because he was high up the pitch and actually had a decent kind of hold up, and that allowed the midfield and the wingers to push up the pitch. Despite him not scoring and probably needing that confidence, I think he was also a little bit unlucky not to win a penalty in the first half. There is something there to work on, but I guess as we've seen with Kevin Nisbet and Esther Sokler, we've discussed, it would only be fair to mention it in the same breath for Peter Ambrose, is strikers are going to be judged on their goal scoring ability.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, I think he will benefit from goals more than anybody else will. You know, I think if he can get a run where he can get a bit of a purple patch, that'll do his development the world of good. But I just thought on Saturday, his willingness to run the channels and, like you say, to get stuck in about, because no disrespect to Elgin, by law of Scottish football, your lower league sides tend to be a lot more physical, and I don't think Peter really shied away from that, which I was quite impressed at, because
Mm.
you know, having never came up against anything like that before, probably, at least at his time in Scotland, it could have been quite a shock to the system, and he could have quite easily shied away. And I think he did a good job at yeah, really getting himself about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, he can be pleased with his performance. Um, I don't think, didn't watch the game on Saturday and think, oh my God, he's absolutely terrible. He put himself about, as I said, unlucky not to score. Other positives for me at the weekend will come on to Alexander Jensen, but it was returns, a return to the starting lineup for Dante Polvara that I want to speak about, but also the return of Pape coming on in the second half, replacing Peter Ambrose. I thought Dante was really good in that midfield, kind of got his, as we've kind of spoken about before, gets his foot on the ball, controls that midfield very well, but he seemed to be playing in more of an advanced role in the number 10, which maybe was a surprise to some.
Yeah, I think maybe somewhat. I think it's a role that I've kind of, I think I mentioned a few weeks ago on the podcast, maybe trying him in the 10 could have been quite interesting. So I quite enjoyed seeing him there. Like you say, he got on the ball a lot more. I think he's a really positive player anyway. So to have him at the top end of the pitch and to sort of spearhead getting the ball forward, I thought was quite good. And like I say, similar to Ambrose, just gave us that extra out to hold the ball up and get players around him quite easily.
And in terms of Pape, again, another positive to see him back on the pitch, another option for us up front, of course. Kevin is but also coming on in the game as well. But for Pape, I thought for me it seemed to be a little bit more of a physical presence up top, but that burst of pace as well. And I'm really hoping to have him fit and available for the weekend, because I think as the defenses get tired, if his minutes are certainly being managed just now, that is an exciting signing, because you could sense the energy as well in the crowd, because when he came on it was 1-0, there was still the nervousness in the air, but his introduction got the crowd going again.
Yeah, I mean, Pape is such an exciting player, and I think it is just because he's so unbelievably unpredictable. And I think it's plays into his style of play. Defenders don't know what he's going to do. He doesn't know what he's going to do. None of us know what he's going to do. And it does put you on your edge of the seat a little bit, because we could whip out a step over, take his man on, and put one in from 25 yards out, or as we've seen, take a duff touch, knock out for a throw in. But you're still kind of excited to see what's coming anyway. But yeah, definitely glad he's back. Hopefully, we're going to maybe manage his minutes a little bit coming in, because it'd be nothing worse than
Mhm.
seeing him sidelined again. As we've sort of seen similarly with Dimitar Mitov. Um, that would be the worst nightmare.
I think it also helps a little bit that maybe we've got a week in between the two games, so his minutes have obviously been managed, and then he's now going to get a full week on the training ground. As I said, I want to come over to Alexander Jensen coming in at left wing back, left back, full back, whatever you want to call that position, in place of James McGarry. Another impressive outing for the newest Don. I think for me the biggest surprise is how fit he looks given his lack of minutes. But what really impressed me, especially in the first goal, was he was not afraid to shirk the challenge. He got himself stuck in, fed the ball to Duke, who in turn fed Shaden Morris to finish. But he was always looking up, looking around, trying to take the team forward, play the pass and move. It seems he's picked up the system or style that Jimmy's trying to implement very well, and he clearly suited to that style.
Yeah, I thought Sandy Jensen, as I'm christening him, we've got Tricky Dicky and Randy Sandy. Um, I thought he was superb. Uh, Covered every blade of grass, like you say. Um, Looks like he's been playing with the squad since the summer. Seemed to click well with the midfielders when he knew when to make the runs over in behind. He knew when to hold back. invert him with Nicky Devlin as well. I noticed, especially in the second half, going over to right back and changing things up. So really, really positive display from him again in a player that I think everyone's quite rightful to be excited for and have that sort of high expectation of, because it looks like we've got quite the player on our hands. Hopefully, I mean, even his free kick in the first half was a good effort.
Yeah, I remember saying I can't wait for this to find top bins. To be honest, I was more impressed we actually put a free kick on target because most of our other free kicks had been absolutely terrible up until then. And I'm not just meaning in the game against Elgin. So if a player can at least hit the free kick on target, we're going somewhere. Um, Another thing, I guess, from the game is the opening period. I, Look, I guess in cup ties away to lower league oppositions, they're probably going to try and start the game well. I think Elgin did do that. Um, Caused us problems. There's no doubt about that in the opening 20 minutes. I think had they had a little bit more composure, maybe some will say that's a bit harsh. They would have taken the lead in the opening 20 minutes. I thought we struggled to settle in that period. Again, we looked hashed on the ball, poor in control, wrong slack passes. Probably for the best that Elgin didn't capitalise from our point of view. In that spell of the opening 20 minutes, more specifically, but maybe through the game as a whole, did you still have concerns around us defensively?
Not particularly, like you say, I think all credit to Alan Hale and Elgin, especially that opening period. He had them set up so superbly well, and they weren't feared. And I think that was the main thing. I think that's what undoes a lot of lower league teams in games like this is they just sit in and attempt to soak up pressure, and it's bound to break. I thought the fact that they pressed high up the park and got in the face of a lot of the players really did almost shock us into waking up a little bit.
Mm.
But I do think as much as Elgin, had odd chances here and there, I couldn't have really seen them scoring. I don't think anything was too clear cut, and I think Doohan really commanded his box well enough for the most part.
Yeah, until he blasted off Nicky Devlin's backside and nearly caused a hairy moment. Um, yeah, I think overall, I thought Rubezic and Tobers dealt with everything well, and it looked like Ruby enjoyed the physical battle with Golding up top as well. Devlin, again, another solid game. Again, himself should have probably had a penalty in the second half where the referee decided to play advantage. The cross got blocked, and that was deemed our advantage. It was a, a very baffling refereeing display again, and I had to correct you because you thought it was a lower league referee, but I think he'd actually officiated one of our games a few weeks back. So he is a Premiership standard ref, not that you'd have known. And as I said, that second goal, I guess in inverted commas. I'm just glad it wasn't a goal that decided that cup tie because for the effort that Elgin put in, they didn't deserve that. Um, but from an Aberdeen point of view, it was just what we needed because it was almost like that release valve was opened on the pressure that was building and the nervousness around certainly the away end. The longer that game stayed at 1-0.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying to the guys I was at the game with that uh, we needed a second goal because it was getting to that point where you were starting to get a little bit panicked, even if Elgin weren't really threatening too much. You just kind of felt like, one ball over the top we don't deal with, it's 1-1, and then this game becomes, as you've been saying for weeks, a potential oil slick.
Yeah.
Um, and you really start to worry. But like I say, I was stood right behind the goal, which is the worst angle to tell whether the ball was over the line, and even then I wasn't really too convinced. But like I said, I'm just glad it wasn't the goal that decided the game.
Yeah, and Duke did seal that with a third goal late on, to put, I guess, the shine on the result. I don't know if they think 3-0. I don't know if it was maybe harsh on Elgin or not, or fair on us because we did create a lot of chances. We just were either not clinical enough or the Elgin goalkeeper did well. The fan view in the Evening Express from Chris Crichton called the victory unconvincing, which has drawn some criticism from people on social media, much like maybe some of our views will, when we're not being overly positive in victory. I can see where Chris is coming from in calling it unconvincing, because the first half maybe wasn't as such as the second half. As I said, I think we were a lot more fluid and a lot more uh, clinical in terms of creating chances in that second half without actually taking them. But I think we've spoken about it on here, where it didn't really matter the result as such. It mattered about getting through. So did it matter at the weekend if it was unconvincing or not?
Not really, no. I think as we'd sort of said, you wanted a few goals. A 1-0 would have maybe kept things a little bit sort of wobbly and nervy and
Mhm.
not really given much confidence going into the St Mirren game. But on the run we've been on, I think getting through was the most important thing. And again, no disrespect to Elgin, it could have been a lot more than three. Like you say, Morris got unlucky, hitting the post. Ambrose got unlucky hitting the bar. Devlin really should have had a penalty. He then also should have
Mhm.
had a free kick in a really dangerous area, forgetting his leg, but he scraped right in the back of, which
Mhm.
went unnoticed as well, somehow, some way. Um, so it really it could have been a lot more had luck sort of gone our way a tiny bit. But um, yeah, I get Crichton's view, but also at the same time, I think it's maybe slightly over exaggerated in a way.
Yeah, and as I said, everyone's entitled to their own views and own opinions, and I don't necessarily disagree with what Chris had to say, because I can totally understand that method. I just think, given the run that we were on and the opposition and the kind of talk certainly around the game, all I was caring about was getting through. And certainly on a weekend that I very much look forward to in the Scottish football calendar, this round of the Scottish Cup, there wasn't many upsets, and I think it says a lot where the BBC are clinging on to Livingston beating Ross County and St Johnstone beating Motherwell as your shocks of the round. Um, so for the draw that's coming up tonight, as we record, there will be 8 Premiership teams and 7 Championship and 1 League One. The potential of an Aberdeen derby still exists, as Cove Rangers, the sole League One representative. I know that's a draw that you are chomping at the bit for. So, if we were to get Cove, you wanting them home or away, or is there anybody else sitting in that draw that you would want to get?
See, it's a tough one. I think for selfish reasons, Cove away would be quite nice, as it will take me 10 minutes to walk from my parents' house. Conversely, it'd be nice to have it at Pittodrie, obviously, just for the bigger crowd and probably ease of access, because Balmoral's not the greatest place in the world for a few thousand people to descend upon. But no, obviously, you're looking at the likes of a St Johnstone, perhaps, a Wraith Rovers, reconvene with Hauke's Log Robson. Um, even as much as it's probably not the preferable thing, if you're going to win the cup, you've got to beat everybody. Why not get one of the Glasgow lot out the way early, Glen? Beat them now. Um, take on Cove in the derby at Hampden for the final. Who knows? But yeah, I think you're probably wanting Cove just in the fact they are the lowest ranked left. You're probably wanting the easiest route possible.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will want Cove. I certainly don't want them away from home, because the Balmoral, as you said, it's just such a terrible ground. And there's a Forfar fan at work, and I saw her saying that terrible ground, freezing cold. I mean, you could sum up, probably other fans of Scottish football would say they're probably talking about Pittodrie. I think looking at the numbers for the draw as well, I said to you the weekend, it feels that Wraith is inevitable, given obviously the connection with Barry Robson. I also think if we do get them, that's a guaranteed TV pick. Outside of Cove, in terms of looking at lower league like positions, you're probably looking towards Airdrie or Hamilton. Um, Again, though, not really two teams that you're certainly enamored about playing in terms of the romance of the cup. Are you someone, though, when it comes to cup draws, that prefers home ties or away ties, or doesn't matter?
I mean, nowadays it doesn't really matter because I'm quite conveniently placed for a lot of them. But and I think also it depends on the ground as well. Like I say, I'd rather never go to New Douglas Park again ever in my life. I've been too depressed there on many an occasion. watching Aberdeen play Hamilton in league action, and I'd rather not relive it. So yeah, potentially, and again, especially if you're playing one of the Premier League, Premiership sides, you're probably going to want a home draw, just have that extra um, sort of factor going on your side.
Yeah, I agree on that. If we're to draw a Premiership team, I definitely want to be at home. If we're talking for away days, based on who's left in the Cup and lower league, give me Dunfermline, please. I have missed a trip down to Dunfermline, seen some good, the bad, and the ugly down there. So definitely wouldn't mind a trip down there if that's what comes. So we'll see, and we'll discuss that on the next episode. But for the rest of the episode, we'll take a look at the weekend's clash with St Mirren. So going into this game, Phil, St Mirren coming into it, yes, they beat Queen of the South 2-1 in the Scottish Cup, but 4 straight league defeats. Maybe a little bit of pressure on Stephen Robinson despite his strong start and St Mirren sitting mid-table. You mentioned last time out, this feels a little bit full circle going into this game. Still standing by that?
Somewhat, and I think by it being full circle, it's the perfect place for our dismal league run to come to an end, hopefully, and undo the wrongs of the earlier trip to Paisley. But yeah, like you say, I think no winless in four, only scoring once, probably the best time we could be facing them. They've had quite a good run at it, and they've played quite good football. Obviously, the winger McMenamin out injured as well, I believe, as well as Chris Dunn, Charles Dunn, sorry.
Marco
Um,
Hara as well.
yeah, so a few big injuries for them, and hopefully on the back of Elgin, a little bit more positivity within the team and a little bit more confidence where we can maybe get back to winning ways at Pittodrie.
And that's what I was going to say. Regardless of the opposition, winning should breed confidence within the football team. We've now got a week, as I mentioned earlier, to go to Cormac Park and work on things. Another week for players to get minutes in the legs, players to understand each other, certainly in terms of our new signings. But the incentive is certainly there this weekend as well. This is an opportunity with Dundee United not playing till the Sunday to put ourselves back into third and put the pressure back onto Jim Goodwin's side in what is certainly shaping up to be a much tighter battle for third place than we assumed a couple of months ago. And given Hibs travel to Ross County and Motherwell face St Johnstone, obviously looking to avenge their Scottish Cup exit, there is a possibility that both Hibernian and Motherwell could close the ground on us if we slip up. So it really is important from an Aberdeen point of view that we get those 3 points on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that pressure is something that hopefully the players can feed off of. Because I think it's something that's always going to be there when you play for Aberdeen, the pressure of expectation and the pressure of trying to be that third biggest force at a minimum. So hopefully it's something they can feed off of and really, like I say, find that form again and get that swagger back effectively in their game.
Yeah, and I think it has to start now because and apologies, I can't remember who put the comment on our video on YouTube after the last episode when they said the real kind of judgment off the back of this run that we've been on won't kind of come from Elgin because we're expected to beat Elgin. It will come starting against St Mirren. So looking at our next 6 fixtures, there will be a 7th in there because of the Scottish Cup. So we start with St Mirren at home before travelling to Hibs. It'll be the Scottish Cup fixture on the weekend of the 8th, 9th of February. Then Dundee away on the 15th, Kilmarnock on the 22nd of February before a trip to Parkhead on Tuesday, the 25th of February. That game being moved live for TV. And then a home match to start March against Dundee United. That fixture also moved for television as well. So, you've probably got 4 games coming up before a tough fixture at Parkhead. We never performed well against Celtic, but that game on the 2nd of March at Pittodrie is really shaping up to be a bit of a blockbuster. So we've got 5 league games. I guess I'm going to get shouted at for discrediting the Celtic game already, but 4 games, 5 games to really put a mark down before, as I said, that game really shaping up to be a big one at the start of March.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like I say, the runs got to turn, um, and especially as we get into the sort of business end of the season, and with the fact that, there's going to be silverware up for grabs in the Scottish Cup, as well. I think being able to get back on the horse and get back on that run is vitally important. And like I say, I'm just hoping that should anything go wrong, like I say, conceding an early goal on Saturday, that there is that noticeable change in the team where we do immediately try and get back on the front foot and don't immediately sort of dip. And it's the same in the stands.
Mm-hmm.
First 10 minutes of Elgin, you were even hearing some rogue shouts when we came under a bit of pressure. And I think it's important that, the players, the staff, the fans, everybody does their bit to make sure that we're in as strong a spot as possible and get back onto winning ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think the rogue shouts, as you call them in Elgin, was a little bit of nerves as well, given the strong start Elgin made. Excuse me, but I think at the weekend there will be a sea of colour planned for the south stand. I know Mez already had that planned, and that will then we'll add the Jimmy Calderwood tribute banner into there as well. Obviously, there'll be emotion surrounding Pittodrie as well, given that news of Jimmy Calderwood's passing. So I think Pittodrie will be emotionally charged at the weekend, but I do agree. I think that the crowd will be looking for us to continue that run. But we've seen already this season, and we've seen in seasons gone by, St Mirren are probably up there for being our so-called bogey side right now. And if you look at last time out in league action, they were very unlucky, probably similar to us against Dundee United, not to come away from that game with points. Probably they should have actually taken more than we did, given they actually had the large share of chances. Olasanya missing a one-on-one, which no doubt had he done that against us, he would have found the back of the net. Also missing a penalty as well. So, you've listed off a couple of injuries that St Mirren have to certainly key players, but they still possess plenty of threats across the pitch that we do need to be wary of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going back to the game earlier on in Paisley, Olasanya caused us an absolute world of bother with his pace and his ability to get in behind. So hopefully we can do a little bit to nullify them. I saw as well, I believe they've recalled another striker from a loan spell over in Northern Ireland who I think scored 10 goals this season over there. So if he's to be included, you're then looking at a potential another goal threat up
Mm-hmm.
top. So there are players that can cause a lot of issues for us. And again, I think it's hopefully now that we have had that first round of fixtures, Jimmy's sort of learned who the sort of danger men are and the key men are and how to nullify them, having seen them in the flesh and how they like to play. So, yeah, I'm hoping there's been learning experiences from first time around, and we
Well,
don't just brick it with long balls.
Well, fingers crossed. In terms of how we approach this game, we've seen numerous changes week in, week out, or day in, day out. It feels with the run of games we've been on. Given the strong performances we've already spoken about, Shaden Morris and Duke in particular, Alexander Jensen as well, is there a potential, in fact, for Jimmy Tillene to possibly name the same starting 11 that started the game against Elgin? I know maybe people will question um, our our thought process here with that meaning Peter Ambrose starts, but also would continue to see Graham Shinney absent from the midfield.
Yeah, I mean it's. I was going to come and say that I don't think I'd be too opposed to it being
Neither.
unchanged, or at least for the most part. You'd maybe want Shinnie in there potentially.
Forward.
I potentially Nielsen, just give him that little rest. I think because he's played a few games, and I think, like I've said before, I think they occupy too much of the same space. But I do think Shinnie looked good when he came on against Elgin, and I think he did. I think it was starting to get a little bit snatchy in the midfield a bit, and he did calm it down. Um, and potentially as well, depending on where Pape is with his fitness, are you potentially looking at him starting it? But again, it comes down to a sort of minute management situation and match sharpness. But like I've said, I don't think Peter did anything to not merit seeing
Mhm.
him in the starting lineup. But I think definitely Morris and Duke on the wings, which again, probably maybe a shame to Keskinen because he has been such a bright spark. But I think at times we maybe have chopped and changed a bit too much that we've not really been able to delve into consistency all that frequently.
Yeah, and I think that has been certainly a problem. It feels over the run that we've been on is that there hasn't been that level of consistency in the team selection. But I just feel, given the performances of the two wingers in particular at Elgin, the goals and the assists, it feels difficult to leave one or both out. Um, Especially if it was for someone like Ockles, given it felt obvious that Elgin game was an opportunity to give him minutes. I wouldn't understand that decision. I guess we could understand if he changes the striker again, because that has seemed to be the one that hasn't stayed, as you say, consistent. Um, I think you're right in saying that if Shinnie was to come in, it would be for Nielsen. I would prefer it to be one or the other rather than both. I like what Palaversa brings alongside Nielsen with his range of passing as well. I think I just personally feel that Shinnie and Nielsen are too similar, that when they're played alongside each other, they're slowing us down. We saw success earlier in the season when Shinnie was in a more forward role in comparison, and I think we saw that again, as you mentioned, when he came on at Elgin at the weekend. I personally felt he was in a more of an advanced role rather than sitting. So if Jimmy does name that same starting 11, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I might change my mind at 4:45, depending on the result, mind you. But I would be in full faith of the manager.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we've said, I think a lot of the players that started in Elgin, especially the top end of the pitch, are confidence players, and putting that arm around them and giving them your backing to go out again on Saturday and show what they can do should hopefully spur them on to maintain a high level of performance.
Well, exactly, and especially now that we've got competition for places. I'm looking at the wingers, the left back area. Although I do think that's going to be Jensen's shirt to lose now, despite how solid McGarry was when called upon, and also in that centre of defence as well. Obviously, we didn't see Dorrington at the weekend. So there's competition, which is good, and I know we're obviously hoping for further competition to be added between now and the close of the transfer window. No rumours as such for us to discuss on this episode, so I think that leaves us nicely. 3/4 of an hour, all wrapped up. Nice to actually have a win to speak about again.
I was about to say it feels good coming on here and not getting PTSD to relive a loss. Makes a change.
It makes a change, and hopefully you enjoyed either watching or listening to a recap of a victory and a preview for, as we said, hopefully making it 2 out of 2. As always, if you've been watching on YouTube, remember to like the video, comment your thoughts down below, follow us on your audio platform of choice. It's going all so well right up until the end there. So until next time, we'll see you then.